Welcome to the Birth Words Podcast, episode number 22.
You're listening to the Birth Words Podcast. Utah-based birth doula and applied linguistics scholar Sarah Pixton digs into the language of pregnancy and birth to help expectant women claim their power as life-giving agents engaged in a praiseworthy work. This podcast aims to promote positive birth paradigms and is not intended as medical advice.
Before we jump into today's episode, I just wanted to pause for a minute and encourage you to get out your Instagram, go to Facebook, find Birth Words, give me a follow. You can stay up to date and share it with anybody that you know who may be interested in the language that we use to make birth better. Give it a share, give it a follow, and then we'll see you online. Margaret Quinlan is an associate professor in the Department of Communication Studies at the University of North Carolina at Charlotte. She explores how communication creates, resists, and transforms knowledge about bodies. She critiques power structures in order to empower individuals who are marginalized inside and outside of healthcare. She authored approximately 40 journal articles, 17 book chapters, and co-produced documentaries in a regional Emmy Award-winning series. She co-authored You're Doing It Wrong, Mothering, Media, and Medical Expertise with Bethany Johnson. So I'm just thrilled to be able to talk with Maggie today about the work that she's done. We're going to focus specifically today on a chapter that she wrote in that book, You're Doing It Wrong, about infertility as an extension of the episode I previously aired, episode 7, about infertility. So Maggie, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Sarah. It really is an honor, and I'm really looking forward to talking to you about not just my research, but my research with Professor Bethany Johnson. And we've been researching women's health and the history of infertility and other health-related women's health-related issues. So I'm looking forward to digging into a little bit of that today.
Excellent. Will you start by giving us just a brief overview of your book, You're Doing It Wrong?
Sure. So Bethany and I were interested in the ways in which new mothers face, and we see mothers as a pretty broad term, face many of the same health issues confronted by women for generations. And Bethany is a historian and I am in communication studies. And so we were interested in how the number of lay experts and technical experts is, potentially growing, especially on social media. So what we did was we looked at what we call the life cycle of early motherhood, which is preconception through toddlerhood. And we looked at different crises that individuals could potentially face during those times, such as fertility and conception, challenges, pregnancy behavior and outcomes, premature birth, infant loss, having a child in the NICU, developmental delays, other postpartum health issues. So what we were interested is in how during these crises moments, individuals tend to receive a lot of advice from experts, such as like doctors, as well as from other individuals, friends, family members, strangers, and individuals on social media. So we looked at the ways in which throughout history, what those messages have looked like, and then what do they look like today on social media.
Excellent. Thanks for that overview. I think that's a really important work that you're doing. And any listeners who have gone through that life cycle of early motherhood, like you're talking about, I'm sure can relate to some advice, whether solicited or unsolicited, that they received, how it's impacted their journey. So I think you're doing really important work. I'm excited to talk more with you about it.
Thank you.
So like I mentioned, you wrote this entire book, I believe, is it 9 chapters?
Mm-hmm, yeah.
Where you dive into a variety of topics in this life cycle of early motherhood. But because I keep my episodes short and because we could go on for hours and hours, we're just going to focus today on a really little piece of it, which is chapter 2, when you talk about infertility. So in chapter 2, which you title A State of Mind, Fertility Treatments and Expertise, you state that the World Health Organization considers both male and female infertility as a disease. And then others, like Marion Sims in the 1850s, saw women's bodies as machines that need to be fixed by an expert mechanic. Even today, treatments are often overly fixated on the problems, and that's in quotes, of the female body, and the experts who can, quote, fix them. How does this perspective and the linguistic framing that accompany it affect would-be expectant couples and their experience through the journey of infertility? And then, if they're able to become pregnant, how does it affect them throughout pregnancy and the postpartum?
Yeah, well, while you were going through that question, the first thing that came to mind was the story of Dr. Latu Dickinson, who practiced in the early 1900s, and we found in his medical journals and in his papers about how he was a doctor who did fertility treatments, and how he used his sperm and other men's sperm to artificially inseminate women, and he did not often tell the women, and the women did not tell their male partners that they were part of the problem. And so this was a really fascinating story to uncover, because, just the sort of the fear, the protection that many individuals did to protect men from the emotional and relational turmoil of infertility, that there, it was believed that men, would not come back from such a disaster learning about their failed masculinity, or they wouldn't bond with the child. We even saw some early 20th century public divorce cases where the woman ended up getting, the custody of the child for the first time, because they found out that it was not the father's sperm that was being used. And so that example is really interesting, because in some of our research with women undergoing infertility, I think of a woman named Vivian, and she did not tell her husband that he had low sperm count, because she, wanted to protect him and didn't want him to have to deal with it. Where, we still see today that many women going through infertility, that they're the bodies that undergo a lot of the treatment, and they're expected to take on the emotional labor from the health crisis, and, that they're expected to keep the emotional stability of the relationship. And so, in terms of, thinking about, what we saw throughout history and what we see today, that, when thinking about how this could impact, possibly becoming pregnant or the birth experience or the postpartum period, that if couples are already not dealing with some of the emotional issues, or not in a really stable, strong point in their relationship when undergoing some of these or having intimacy issues, that those are going to be issues that follow through them through pregnancy, birth, and the postpartum period. And so, we still see today, right, that you're not considered whole if you're not a mother. Your identity is supposed to be, you're supposed to naturally be a mother, and you're to blame, or female failure, or the failure of the woman if infertility occurs. And so, we still see a lot of women going through infertility dealing with depression, social isolation, depression, or relationship issues, sexual dysfunction, right, all going through all of this. So if you're able then to become pregnant, some of those issues for sure would follow through, right?
Yeah. Wow. That is heavy. And so important that you're shedding light on it so that we work to change some of that. Anyway, yeah, that is really heavy and difficult for all of those women who are feeling the weight and the blame. It should be a shared journey to shoulder with somebody else.
Right.
All right. Thank you. All right. I'm going to move on to the next question, which again deals with infertility, as you wrote about in chapter 2. So you wrote that the social and emotional challenges of those facing infertility are very similar, eerily similar, you can say, to others in their shoes over 100 years ago, although there's a much higher likelihood that they'll be able to become pregnant and birth a healthy. So why does the social and emotional journey remain so challenging in such similar ways when so much has changed?
Yeah, it's interesting. I wonder, after going through the historical aspects of this, I am curious about how much has really changed, right? Mm-hmm. That we still believe, right, the biological mandate, and we assume that there was, romantic love that produced this child, which is a romantic, 19th century idea, that there's still the same messages that if that doesn't happen, or if you're not able to have a healthy, quote unquote, baby, that somehow you failed, that you're shamed, that, we see the lengths that women do when going through infertility treatment, that not in this chapter, but in some of our other research about Instagram and infertility, we see women who have Instagram accounts that are just for their infertility journey and can't be usually connected to their name. And they go there to, create community and to protect their identity. They're not telling others in their lives that they're struggling with this. And, are connecting and trying to get lay and medical expertise through these sites. And so what we would think has shifted a lot, in many ways hasn't. And so, I think about, just even the shame and the stereotypes about African American women who are infertile, that they are sort of a double failure, because the idea that African American women or women of color are hyper fertile, and then if they're not, that's sort of a double failure, imbued with a lot of racial stereotypes. And so we have groups like Fertility for Color Girls and another group called Broken Brown Egg that tries to, bring awareness to the silence that happens for individuals who go through infertility. And so, in my opinion, even though, the likelihood that an individual will get pregnant has really increased, that I would like to personally have seen more of a shift in some of the challenges that individuals going through infertility face.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think that that's a phenomenon that is not unique to this realm, that cultural frameworks sometimes just change very, very slowly. So even if there's technological improvements that are changing rapidly, on top of that, underneath you've got this cultural framework that really takes a lot of work to progress and evolve. Does that resonate with what you've found?
Absolutely.
All right. Well, I guess we're doing the heavy lifting, the work of changing that underlying cultural framework.
Yeah.
All right.
More to be done, though, right?
What's that?
I said a lot more to be done.
For sure, yeah. And more numbers are needed and a lot more awareness. So you started to touch on the role of social media. So my next question brings that in. What role does the discourse of social media play in shaping understandings of fertility? And you've talked a bit about the supposed lay versus technical dichotomy that's blurred on social media, and how does that affect would-be parents?
Well, one thing, we talk a lot about, my research partner and I, is that if somebody on social media shows that they're confident, that is somehow confused with being an expert in something. So if you're somebody who sells Shakeology, right, that you're an expert in this, and that is, sort of your idea of something that could cure infertility or could help, get your body in the right, enough superfoods, right, to be able to prepare for a baby. And so it's interesting in, Facebook groups that I belong to, and different social media aspects, you see a lot of people posting, I could post something and get a response from a lactation consultant. I could get a response from a pediatrician. I could get a response from somebody who, sells, some sort of organic product or something, CBD oil, right? And so, we see a lot of people posting, and it's been fascinating to watch how even, individuals are able to sort of speak back to some of the discourse in these spaces, right? That we saw a natural medicine practice who was posting on Instagram about how, you need to prepare your garden for having a child. And I saw women speaking back to this person saying, I'm vegan, I've done acupuncture, I exercise, I look very healthy, but I have, terrible egg quality. And that has nothing to do, right, with, with what you're saying. And so I think it's an interesting space where individuals can speak out, they can have their voice recognized, they can talk about how some of the language used to talk about fertility or women's bodies is inaccurate. And I think sometimes these are safe spaces where women can do this, but not that they wouldn't feel safe maybe doing it in or disagreeing in their doctor's office, right? And so, we've seen, ways in which women can, share care packages with each other, for when they've connected with people going through the same treatment cycle as them, and sending care packages or medicine to each other, or the ways in which some of these natural practices even have really have sort of a medical economy to them. And so so I tend to see social media as having a lot of dark qualities to it, a lot of negative social support, but I have definitely myself benefited from some of these communities in ways that, I've been able to connect with people going through some of the same struggles that I have, or I've been able to donate my breast milk to a woman having trouble, or her baby's in the NICU or something. So, so I do see a lot of potential of these moments and of social media to connect people. But I'm also very cautious of how sometimes you'll see a lot of fertility e-courses, and we talk about them in our book. And these e-courses sort of peddle a lot of them peddle the idea of just getting your mind right, or just relaxing, and they use a lot of 19th century language, which, if that doesn't work for you, it places a lot of blame or puts a pile of shame on you because you weren't in the right mindset to do that. And, you'll see a lot of people in a desperate state, most likely signing up for these because they can't afford a $30,000 treatment and an $800 e-course that would allow them to get in the right mindset, in quotes, to get pregnant. The ways in which that plays on this medical economy, and the ways in which we need to be aware of these practices happening, and to help people understand that just getting in the right mindset, or going on a vacation, or drinking a glass of wine, for a lot of people is not going to get them pregnant. And you see a lot of that same language on social media today.
Yeah. How do you feel like that interplays with the messages they may be receiving on social media with the face-to-face interactions these people struggling with infertility might be having with their doctors or with close friends and family?
I think that's a great question, that I think a lot of women do internalize these messages, right? Mm-hmm. That there's this great post that we have, an Instagram post that we got permission to use, and it shows this woman who has all of her infertility meds, on a desk or something, that she has, different alternatives, such as, superfoods or coconut oil and all of those also embedded in the image is, a candle to help her relax. And then she even has, cards that says, reminding her to relax. And so I think that these messages are so internalized in people's experience. And, I think doctors need to know that individuals are doing acupuncture and they are doing, alternative medicine, as well as, the medicine or the protocol that's been prescribed to them through infertility. And so, that this is just a part of our culture, and, we need to be talking about it, that people are going to alternative and biomedical approaches to infertility.
Thank you. And thank you for doing the work to get people talking about it, get people aware of the complexity, the struggles and the layers and the things that are heard and read, and how this all kind of jumbles together to make a rather confusing experience for people going through infertility.
Absolutely. And just the cost of it all makes sense why individuals are doing everything possible,
right.
To possibly have a baby, and the toll that's, taking on them financially, emotionally, relationally, etc.
Yeah, it's expensive in more ways than just financially. It takes a toll on many
Correct.
aspects of our being. All right. Well, I feel like we've just kind of scraped the surface of a very complex topic, but I invite all of our listeners to look into You're Doing It Wrong. Can you remind me the subtitle, Maggie?
Yes, it's You're Doing It Wrong, Mothering, Media, and Medical Expertise.
Thank you. And thank you for talking with us today about where those messages are coming from, because no woman wants to be told she's doing it wrong. And so thank you for your work to help us dig through where those messages are coming from and realize that there are just many approaches and many layers of this challenging life situation that comes to so many. And I think it's comforting,
probably to your listeners to realize that you're not the only one going through these messages, that women throughout history have experienced it. And so for me, unpacking the historical arc was really helpful in saying, okay, I'm not alone, that women throughout history have been getting this message, and, what can I do about it, or how can I work through some of these messages to help me through the crisis that I'm experiencing at this moment.
Thank you. Thank you for your work, and thank you for talking with me today. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Sarah. It was a lot of fun.
Thank you for joining me on today's episode. As we wrap up, I just want to extend an invitation. If you are liking what you hear on the podcast, if you feel like you've learned something, or it's given you a new perspective that's been helpful, if it's given you power or confidence, or helped you reflect on the language that you use, please leave a review. I'd love to hear your thoughts. I'd love to hear what's helpful and what's working for you. And please share with your friends, colleagues, and neighbors so that we can spread the influence of birth words.
Did words play an important role in your birth experience? If you're interested in sharing your story on the podcast, go to www.birthwords.com. If you're liking what you hear on the podcast, please leave a review on your podcast app. For more resources about harnessing the power of words to benefit the birth experience, visit birthwords.com.